The first time the words left her mouth, the air in my own goddamn kitchen actually went cold. Just leave the plates, the maid will handle it in the morning. My daughter-in-law, Brittany, said this while looking right at me, a smirk playing on her freshly filled lips. She said it to a room full of her snickering friends while I stood there holding a platter of filet mignon I'd paid for, cooked to perfection, and was now serving in the house my dead husband and I built with our own hands. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Every pair of eyes in that room flicked to me, waiting for my reaction. My son, Liam, my own flesh and blood, just stared at his plate, a coward hiding behind his champagne flute. In that single, breath-stealing moment, I saw the last 28 years of my life, the sleepless nights, the burned casseroles, the mortgage payments, the Christmas mornings, go up in flames. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a grandmother to be. I was the help. Later, as I scrubbed red wine out of my imported Italian tablecloth, the real horror began. Their voices drifted down from their bedroom, my old bedroom, the one where Tom had taken his last breath. "Did you see her face?" Brittany giggled, the sound like shattering glass. "I thought the old bat was going to have a stroke." "Babe, come on." Liam's voice was weak, pathetic. "That was harsh." "Don't be such a mama's boy," she snapped. "We're living in her dusty museum, paying for nothing, and she's lucky we're even here. My therapist says her energy is toxic. We need our own space, Liam. That penthouse at the Azure, it has a private elevator. We deserve that." My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just disrespect. This was a calculated war, and I had been sleeping in the enemy's camp, cooking them 3 meals a day. The next morning, I became a ghost in my own home. I watched them from the doorway as Brittany scrolled through Zillow on her iPad, pointing at multi-million-dollar properties. "My trust fund could cover the down payment if your mom would just kick the bucket already. I mean, she's what, 68? How much longer are we supposed to wait?" I felt the world tilt. They weren't just using me. They were waiting for me to die. That's when the switch flipped. The grief, the hurt, the betrayal, it all hardened into something cold and sharp in my chest. A weapon. I went to the basement, to the fireproof box hidden behind the water heater. Inside, next to Tom's wedding ring, was a USB drive. On it was every secret I'd ever kept from my son. The real estate portfolio, the offshore accounts, the multi-million-dollar empire I'd built and hidden from him, wanting him to build his own damn life. I drove to a part of town they'd never be caught dead in and bought 3 burner phones and a tiny, powerful voice recorder. That afternoon, while Brittany was getting her weekly Botox, I placed the recorder under their bed. What I heard that night made my soul vomit. "The life insurance is $2 million, but we can't just—" "Don't go soft on me now," Brittany purred, her voice slick as oil. "The brake lines on her old Buick are practically rusted through. One good hard press on a steep hill, it would be a tragedy, an accident." I had to physically clamp my mouth over from screaming. They weren't just waiting for me to die, they were planning it. The next day, I put on the black Chanel suit I'd bought to bury my husband and went to see the one person who scared me more than the IRS, my lawyer, Susan, the Barracuda Goldstein. "Listen," I said, playing the audio from the recorder. Susan didn't even blink. "We need to move fast. The trust is tight, but we need to document everything. We'll freeze all joint accounts today." "I don't want to freeze anything," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I want to give them exactly what they think they want." The plan was beautiful in its cruelty. I found them the perfect prison, a penthouse so expensive it would bleed them dry in 6 months. I played the doting mother-in-law, oohing and eyeing over the marble counters. "It's perfect for you two. Let me help with the deposit." The day they signed the lease, I made them a celebration dinner. I used my grandmother's china. I opened a $500 bottle of wine. I watched them toast to their new life, their eyes glittering with greed, completely unaware they were dancing on the edge of their own grave. As Brittany gushed about hiring a celebrity designer, I reached into my pocket. The moment had arrived. I slid a single key across the polished table. It gleamed under the chandelier. "Your new penthouse," I said, my voice sweet as cyanide. "I paid the first year's rent in full." Brittany's squeal of delight was cut short when I slid a second set of keys toward her. These were older, heavier. The keys to my house. "And these," I said, my eyes locking with her, "are yours now." Confusion, then dawning horror. "I'm moving to my villa in Tuscany," I continued, standing up. "This house is too full of toxic energy. I'm putting it on the market next week. You have 30 days to remove your things." Liam shot to his feet. "Mom, what the hell? We can't afford that penthouse on our own." I picked up my purse, where 2 first-class tickets to Italy were already booked. "Then I suggest you get second jobs. The free ride is over. And Brittany," I paused at the door, delivering the final blow with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Good luck with the mortgage on that new life of yours. Though I guess you'll need more than luck now that my $2 million life insurance policy has been canceled. The sound of her wine glass shattering on the floor was the most beautiful music I'd heard in years. I walked out without looking back. The ghost of my old life finally laid to rest. The game was over, and the maid had just won. The silence in my car was louder than any scream. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, but inside I was shaking like a leaf. I'd just walked out of my own home, the home I'd lived in for 35 years, and left my only child and his viper of a wife sitting in stunned silence. I could still see Brittany's face, that perfect mask of shock and horror as her world collapsed in the span of 60 seconds. I didn't drive far, just around the corner, where I parked under the big oak tree and let the sobs rack my body. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, undiluted rage. That bitch had been planning my death. My own son had sat there and listened to her talk about my rusted brake lines like they were discussing the weather. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. After 10 minutes, I wiped my face clean. No more tears. Brittany wanted a villain. She was about to get one. My first call was to my security company. Yeah, this is Eleanor Williams. I need to report a breach. My daughter-in-law has been making threats. I want all the codes changed on the brownstone immediately. And I want the security cameras activated 24/7 with alerts sent directly to my phone. I gave them the new code, Tom 1964, my husband's name and birth year. A final middle finger to the people trying to erase his memory. Next, I called Susan. It's done. They're in the penthouse. Now let's make sure they stay there. Susan's voice was all business. I've already filed the paperwork to freeze all joint accounts. I'm also sending a formal cease and desist to Brittany's interior design company regarding the unauthorized use of your funds. And Ellie, I took the liberty of contacting the life insurance company. The policy has been canceled, and I made sure they noted the reason as suspected fraud. A cold smile touched my lips. Perfect. But I knew this was only the beginning. Lions don't just lay down when you take their food away. They get hungry and desperate. I checked into a nice hotel under my maiden name, Eleanor Petrova. My grandparents would have been proud. From my room on the 15th floor, I opened my laptop and pulled up the security feed from my house. The camera showed Liam and Brittany arguing furiously in the living room. You said she was just a sweet old lady with some savings, Brittany shrieked, throwing a decorative vase against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, my grandmother's vase. Well, I thought she was, Liam yelled back, running his hands through his hair. She drove a 10-year-old Buick, for Christ's sake. Well, your clueless mom just outplayed us. We're locked out of the bank accounts. My Amex is declined. How in the hell are we supposed to pay for that penthouse? I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't have been planning her murder, Brittany. The fight escalated, getting uglier by the second. I watched, my heart turning to stone. This was the man I'd raised. This was the woman he'd chosen. The next morning, my phone blew up. Calls from Liam, texts from Brittany that went from pleading to vicious in the span of an hour. Mom, please, we need to talk. We're sorry. You can't do this to us. We're family. Mom, I'm begging you. We have nowhere to go. You evil old bitch. I'll ruin you. I deleted them all. But then came the message that made my blood run cold. If you don't give us the money, I'll tell everyone what you did. I'll tell them about the affair you had while Tom was dying. I'll destroy your precious reputation. My breath caught in my throat. The one secret I'd kept buried for 10 years. The one terrible mistake I'd made in my grief. A 3-month relationship with Tom's oncologist that ended almost as soon as it began. How the hell did she know? I immediately called Susan. They're going for the nuclear option. They're threatening to go public with personal information. Susan was silent for a moment. Ellie, are you telling me there's something they can actually use? Nothing illegal, just painful and private. Then we hit back harder, she said, her voice grim. I'm sending a formal letter stating that any defamation will result in a lawsuit so massive it'll follow them to their graves. But we need to be proactive. That's when I had my idea. A beautiful, terrible idea. I logged into the cloud storage that held all of Brittany's personal data, a password she'd foolishly given me when she'd asked me to fix her phone 6 months ago. I scrolled through her photos, her emails, her search history, and I struck gold. Brittany hadn't just been planning my murder. She'd been living a double life. There were emails to another man, a married man, planning a future together. There were searches for how to get someone declared incompetent and life insurance payout timeline. And most damning of all, there were screenshots of text messages between her and Liam discussing how to speed up the inheritance process. I compiled it all into a single devastating file, but I didn't send it to them. Not yet. Instead, I did something even more brutal. I booked a billboard. Right in the center of downtown, on the building directly across from Brittany's favorite yoga studio, a massive digital ad appeared. It showed a beautiful photo of me and Tom on our wedding day, smiling and young and full of hope. Underneath, in huge, bold letters, it read, "To my son and daughter-in-law, the maid has left the building. P.S. Check your email." At exactly 8 a.m., as Brittany would be leaving her yoga class, the email went out. Not just to them, but to everyone in their contact list. Their friends, their business contacts, their parents. The email contained every damning piece of evidence I'd collected. The audio of them planning my murder, the screenshots of their texts, photos of Brittany with her lover, and at the bottom, a single line. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." My phone exploded. But this time, it wasn't just Liam and Brittany. It was reporters, old friends, even Brittany's mother, sobbing, begging me to have mercy. I turned my phone off. I poured myself a glass of expensive bourbon, Tom's favorite, and I turned on the news. And there it was. My story splashed across every channel. Local socialites caught in murder for inheritance plot. Their faces were everywhere. Their lives were over. I took a slow sip of whiskey, the burn feeling like justice. They thought they could break me. They thought they could take everything from me. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot that the maid knows where all the bodies are buried. And I was just getting started. The morning after the billboard went up, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Liam and 32 text messages that went from desperate begging to pure venom. The last one from Brittany simply read, "You're a dead woman walking." I smiled, poured myself coffee in my hotel suite, and turned on the local news. There they were, my son and his trophy wife, trying to push through a mob of reporters outside their luxury penthouse. Brittany had sunglasses on, but I could see the tremble in her hands. Liam looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Mr. Williams, is it true you conspired to kill your mother for her money?" "Brittany, how does it feel to be exposed as an adulterer and a would-be murderer?" I took a slow sip of coffee. The rich, dark blend tasted like victory. But then my phone rang. It wasn't Liam or Brittany. It was a number I hadn't seen in years. Mark, Tom's brother. My stomach dropped. "Ellie," his voice was gravelly with disappointment, "I saw the news. Is this true? About you and David? While Tom was—" The air left my lungs. Of all the things to become public, this was the one that felt like a knife twisting in an old wound. "Mark, it was 10 years ago. It lasted 3 months. I was grieving and stupid. Tom loved you until his last breath," he said quietly, before hanging up. I sat there, the taste of coffee now bitter in my mouth. Brittany had known exactly where to strike. She'd gone for the one thing that could still hurt me. Tom's memory. 2 hours later, my hotel room phone rang. The front desk said, "Miss Petrova, there's a Liam Williams here to see you. He's quite insistent." I almost said no, but something in me needed to look my son in the eye one last time. "Send him up." When Liam walked in, I barely recognized him. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes rumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Mom," his voice broke, "you have to stop this. She's not well. She's talking crazy." Crazy like planning to murder me? I asked coldly. She didn't mean it. It was just talk. We were stressed about money. I stared at him, this stranger who shared my DNA. Get out, Liam. No, listen to me. He dropped to his knees, actual tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But Mom, you're destroying us. Brittany's pregnant. The world stopped spinning. Pregnant? My grandchild? For a moment, the cold fortress I'd built around my heart cracked. A baby. Tom's grandbaby. But then I remembered the audio recording. Her brake lines on her old Buick are practically rusted through. They'd been planning to kill me while she was carrying my grandchild. The crack in my heart sealed shut, harder than before. Get out, I repeated, my voice like ice, and take your unborn accomplice with you. The look of horror on his face would haunt me forever. How can you be so cold? This is your grandchild. That child will never know me, I said, opening the hotel room door. And if you ever contact me again, I'll release the security footage of you two doing cocaine in my living room last Christmas, the one where you're both talking about how worthless my antique furniture is. His face went white. He hadn't known about that camera. As he stumbled out, my phone buzzed with a security alert. Motion detected at my house. I pulled up the feed to see Brittany, her face twisted with rage, smashing the front window with a rock. She climbed through screaming my name like a banshee. I know you're watching, you old bitch. This is my house, mine. She began to tear the place apart. My photographs, Tom's books, our wedding china. She was a tornado of destruction, screaming about how she'd ruined my life. I watched, my finger hovering over the button to call the police. But then I saw something that made me pause. She went to the mantelpiece, to the false panel behind it where I kept my emergency cash, the one only 3 people knew about, me, Tom, and Liam. She pulled out the metal box containing $50,000 in cash and all my important documents. My blood ran cold. Liam had told her. He'd given her my last secret. As she stuffed the cash into her purse, I made the call. 911? What's your emergency? Yes, I said calmly, watching Brittany on my screen as she now tried to set fire to my curtains with a lighter. There's a burglary in progress at 1243 Maple Drive. The intruder is armed and dangerous. She's destroying property and attempting to commit arson. I gave them Brittany's description and hung up. Then I called Susan. It's time. File the restraining order and begin the process of suing them for emotional distress, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. Through the security camera, I watched as police cars surrounded my house. I saw them drag a screaming, kicking Brittany out in handcuffs. I saw Liam arrive, trying to explain to officers, looking utterly broken. I should have felt something. Guilt. Regret. Pity. But all I felt was peace. They tried to take everything from me. My money, my home, my dignity, my life. But they've forgotten one crucial thing. The maid always knows where everything is kept. And this maid had just taken out the trash.
The phone wouldn't stop ringing. News stations, old friends, reporters camped outside my hotel. But the call that finally made me pick up was from St. Jude's Hospital. Ms. Williams, your daughter-in-law, Brittany Williams, was admitted last night. She's experiencing complications with her pregnancy. I hung up without answering. Letter rot. But then my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. A photo of an ultrasound. A tiny, blurry bean with a flickering heartbeat. Underneath, One word. Grandma? My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That little flicker. It looked just like Liam's first ultrasound. Tom had cried when he saw it. I called Susan, my voice unsteady. They're using the baby. Don't fall for it, Ellie. It's a manipulation tactic. But that night I dreamed of Tom. He was standing in the nursery we'd prepared for Liam, painting clouds on the ceiling. He turned to me, his smile sad. The baby's innocent, Ellie. I woke up crying for the first time since this nightmare began. The next morning, I did something stupid. I went to the hospital. Brittany looked small in the hospital bed, hooked up to monitors. No makeup, no designer clothes. Just a scared, pregnant girl. When she saw me, fresh tears welled in her eyes. They said I might lose the baby, she whispered. The stress. Liam stood protectively beside her, his face haggard. Mom, please. We've lost everything. The penthouse evicted us. Our cars are repossessed. We're living in a motel. But the baby, please. I looked at the monitor, showing the baby's steady heartbeat, at Brittany's hand resting on her small bump, and I made the worst decision of my life. I'll pay for the medical bills, I said quietly, and I'll set up a trust fund for the baby, but you'll never see a dime of my money directly. The relief on their faces should have warned me, but I was too busy remembering how Tom's hand had felt on my stomach when I was pregnant with Liam. Over the next month, I paid for Brittany's hospital stays. I hired a nutritionist. I even found them a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. I told myself I was doing it for the baby, for Tom. Then came the day Brittany was released from the hospital. She invited me over to their new apartment to thank me. The moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The apartment was too clean, too quiet. Brittany smiled, that same cold smirk I remembered from my kitchen. Sit down, Eleanor. We need to talk. Liam stood by the window, refusing to meet my eyes. I know about the offshore accounts, Brittany said sweetly. The ones in the Caymans, the ones you didn't think anyone knew about. My blood ran cold. I don't know what you're... Don't bother lying, she cut me off. We have copies of everything. And if you don't transfer $5 million to our account right now, we're going to the IRS. Tax evasion carries a longer sentence than attempted murder, doesn't it? I stared at Liam. You knew about this? He finally looked at me, his eyes dead. Your father would be so ashamed of you. I walked out as they screamed after me, their threats echoing in the hallway. I got in my car and drove straight to the police station with 2 recordings, theirs and mine. The detective listened to both, his face growing increasingly grim. They were blackmailing you? I said quietly, after attempting to kill me. And I have proof they falsified medical records to manipulate me. The doctor who's been treating Brittany, he's her lover. There is no high-risk pregnancy. The restraining order became permanent that afternoon. The criminal charges followed: extortion, conspiracy, fraud. As I signed the final papers to completely disinherit Liam, I thought about that ultrasound photo, that little flickering heartbeat. Somewhere my grandchild was growing, and thanks to their parents' greed, that child would never know its grandmother. The tragedy of it threatened to swallow me whole. But then I remembered Tom's face in my dream. The baby is innocent, he'd said. So I did one last thing. I set up the trust fund anyway. The money would be waiting when the child turned 25. No strings attached. It was done. The war was over. I'd won every battle, but lost the only thing that ever really mattered. That night, I poured 2 glasses of bourbon, one for me, one for Tom's ghost. The house was quiet. The security system was armed. The doors were locked. And for the first time in my life, I was completely alone.
The silence in my empty house was deafening. 6 months had passed since I'd won the war against my own family. Liam and Brittany had taken a plea deal, 5 years in prison for extortion and conspiracy. The press had moved on to fresher scandals. My life was peaceful, secure, and utterly meaningless. I'd started having the same nightmare every night. I'm standing in a nursery, painting clouds on the ceiling like Tom and I did for Liam, but when I look down, the crib is empty, and I can hear a baby crying somewhere in the distance. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. The handwriting was Liam's. Mom, I know I don't deserve to write this. I know you'll probably burn it without reading, but Brittany lost the baby last month. Complications from the stress, they said. She's filed for divorce from prison. I've had a lot of time to think in here. I remember everything. How you worked 3 jobs to put me through college. How you held my hand through my first broken heart. How you never missed a single baseball game. And I threw it all away for a woman who never loved me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand why you did what you did. And I'm so, so sorry. You were right about Dad. He would be ashamed of me. Goodbye, Mom. Liam. The paper fell from my hands. The baby was gone. My grandchild, the one I'd been protecting, the reason I'd shown mercy, was gone. For 3 days, I didn't leave the house. I sat in the growing darkness, surrounded by photographs of the family I'd destroyed. Tom smiling with his arm around me. Liam as a toddler covered in cake on his first birthday. The life we'd built together reduced to ashes. On the 4th day, I called Susan. I want to drop the restraining order, I told her. Ellie, no. After everything they've done, they lost their child, Susan. The punishment has far exceeded the crime. There was a long silence. What are you going to do? I don't know, I whispered. But I can't live like this anymore. The next morning, I drove to the state prison. The visiting room was exactly like in the movies. Plastic chairs, vending machines, and the smell of despair. When they brought Liam in, I barely recognized him. The arrogant, polished man was gone. In his place was a hollow-eyed boy in an orange jumpsuit, his hands shaking as he sat across from me. Mom? His voice cracked. I didn't think you'd come. I reached across the table and took his hand. It was cold. I read your letter. Tears streamed down his face. I'm so sorry. For everything. The things we said, what we planned. I'll never forgive myself. Neither will I said softly. But we're all we have left. That's when I noticed the bruises on his wrists, the way he flinched when the guard walked by too close. Are you safe in here? He gave me a sad smile. It doesn't matter anymore. But it did matter. He was still my son. I stood up abruptly. Wait here. I marched to the warden's office and did what I do best. I negotiated. By the time I left, I'd secured Liam's transfer to a minimum security facility. I'd paid for him to have a better lawyer to appeal his case. I'd even arranged for psychological counseling. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even reconciliation. It was simply the last thing a mother could do for her child. As I drove away from the prison, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. For the first time in years, I felt something other than anger or grief. It wasn't happiness. That ship had sailed. But it was peace. I'd started having the same nightmare every night. But in the end, I discovered I was so much more than that. I was a survivor. I was a fighter. And despite everything, I was still a mother. The house was waiting for me when I got home.
empty, silent, but no longer lonely. Because I'd finally made peace with the ghost that haunted it. I poured 1 glass of bourbon instead of 2, raised it to Tom's photograph. We did okay. Our boy lost his way, but he's still our boy. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. I walked out into the backyard, looked up at the stars, and made a wish. Not for revenge, not for money, not even for happiness. Just for tomorrow. And for the first time in a very long time, I actually wanted to see it come.